in case this wasn't enough, I'm going to let Elon do it. Who else is here?
Well, President Milei has a gift for me.
Javier Milei from Argentina. You guys know who that is, right? Why don't we bring him out?
Yeah. Thank you. This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
That's perfect. All right. I love it. Mr. President, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you. I love it. We love it. We love it.
All right.
They told me to put this right.
Where should we put it?
They want it right here.
All right, great.
A little stage prop.
All of you guys too.
Thanks, guys. Have a seat.
Faithfully.
That I will faithfully
Discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Kash Patel takes over as FBI director, pledging to rebuild trust and accountability.
First and foremost, we were just with President Trump, and I just want to thank him. I know he's not here in the room right now, but what a ride we have been on, what a courageous warrior and leader he has been, and the faith and trust he has put in me to lead the FBI is the greatest honor that I'll ever have in my life. And to General Bondi, that sounds pretty freaking cool. Pam, you're my sister, you're my mentor, you're my friend, you're my boss, and the confidence you have placed in me, I will never violate that trust. The men and women of the FBI will be led under your leadership through one standard, the Constitution. So thank you for entrusting me, Pam. Oh, man.
Big ideas don't come easy.
This is effing crazy. So obviously you don't get here alone. You know, I'm here because of God. I'm here because of my family, and I'm here because of my friends. And you're literally in this room because you made it happen.
This how you want to do? You got more to the table.
Are we live?
Oh, we are live.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Sorry for being a little late getting started. I had car trouble and had to wait for my partner and colleague and associate in crime to come and pick me up. This is the Friday, February 28th edition of the Board Watch. And before we get started, let me offer my condolences to House Speaker Adrian Jones. I understand that her son passed away was discovered, passed away on yesterday. And so my heartfelt condolences go to Adrian, her family, her brother Barry, who I worked with a number of years ago in the Baltimore County school system. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. And so our prayers are with her and her family this morning. Well, before we get into the Trumpisms, if you will, that have occurred over the last week, we have reviewed the board's agenda for next week, and I'm going to ask my colleague Hassan if he just saw anything in the agenda that might be of note. I would start, however, by congratulating Monumental Paving Company, one of my clients, for their success in being the apparent low bidder on a substantial contract with the city that is to be awarded to them on next Wednesday. It's a contract worth in excess of $7 million. Congratulations to Monumental, George Mahoney, and his son, Patrick. All right, Hassan, anything of note on the board's agenda for next week? That is March 5th.
Well, first I'll say good morning to the viewers out there. How are you guys? We're here for another session. The Board of Estimates is always interesting. Just watching what they do and how they operate. And for a lot of our viewers, they don't have the opportunity to see what goes on and see how things work. So even though I think Baltimore City is fairly transparent, transparency doesn't matter if no one knows where to look and no one knows how to see things and understand what goes on. The agendas are quite long. So when you go online and you see the agenda, it seemed too long to be an agenda for any reasonable meeting. I feel like they throw things on there just to make people nervous about going through and seeing what's on there. So one of the things we hope to do is to open up the transparency so you guys can see in a real way what things mean. One of the things we saw on the agenda were some unauthorized procurement payments. So typically, as our clients know, I know my small business clients, they go and they bid for city jobs, and if they may get it, they will be able to get paid for the services they do. If they don't get it, they may do a bid protest and go forward. But there are times when there are funds being paid to companies for past work. So work that was done, it may not have been approved properly, but they get paid for it nonetheless. Now we see that contracting all the time when you may expand the scope of the work you do. Right, so if you're doing a project and it turns out, say you're doing some concrete or some foundation work, and it's issues. I had a client where they were doing some heavy earth material moving, and they had a big machine out there doing it, but the ground wasn't conducive. So when it got there, they needed a bigger machine, which means the bid they bid for was no longer valid. They had to actually bump it up, and they did change orders in mid-contract. Well, we are seeing things that I have here a copy of SB 2415094 for public safety. They want to approve unauthorized procurement, and whenever it says unauthorized, it gives the impression to me that maybe we should be doing this. So I know you have clients that do this much more than my clients do. When you see unauthorized procurement, what do you think?
Well, what it means is that the contractual basis for it, the legal basis for the payment, really doesn't exist. That's what makes it unauthorized. Under the laws that are applicable here to the city under city charter and otherwise, in order to get paid for services provided or goods provided to the city, there must be a valid contract, and that contract must have been approved in the manner that's required under law.
Which is to my point, when you go and you modify the contract, right. Contract. But so for the guests, for the viewers, how do you get a contract before the Board of Estimates that wasn't authorized? How does it even get to them so they can say we'll give you more money?
Well, it's not supposed to be, and that's why it's labeled unauthorized procurement. For example, the 3 items that are on next week's agenda as unauthorized procurement relate to contracts that existed for the period, for example, from May 1st, 2024 through October 8th, 2024.
And for the viewers, 1 second, Bob, that's right. SB 2415094, SB 2415005, and SB 2025-10328.
Yeah, those are the item numbers as they appear in the board agenda. The board agenda is available online at the site of the Baltimore City Comptroller's Office if you care to get a copy or to review that agenda. And as always, the board proceedings can be viewed on Charm TV or subsequently, I guess, on WebEx. You can listen, and maybe even on YouTube. I'm not sure. But in these instances, in all 3 instances, the actual contracts involved were all at least a year, in most cases, a year or more prior to the actual time that the board is being requested to approve payment. As I said, one began on May 1, 2024 and ended in October of that year. I think we're in 2025 now. One began on June 25th, 2020 and ended on January 31st, 2022. And the other began on May 1st, 2024 and is scheduled to end on April 30 of this year. In each instance, the board is being requested to approve payments retroactively, which again is not supposed to happen, but we see all too frequently happening in Baltimore City. These are just three examples. And
back up some. So one, I want to point to the SB 25011328. The time frame for the agreement was June 2020 to January 2022. Are we saying the work was rendered and services were provided to the city and no money was paid, and so they're getting reimbursement for things done, or is that the purpose of this unauthorized procurement?
Well, I suspect, and I don't really know, but I suspect that the vendors involved were long ago paid, and I think that these are just accounting reconciliations that are required. That because when the agencies involved, in one case it's the fire department, in another case it's Department of General Services. When these agencies are audited, the auditor will find these expenditures, but will not find any authorization to cover them. That is to say, they won't find a contract the timing of the work under the contract coincides with the date of the payment. Because there was no money in the budget for that particular item at the time the services were rendered.
But for the one from the SB 25010328, the document that they produced indicate that the city still owes the $51,000. Now, money not being in the contract is one thing. That was 2022. So they didn't have money in 23. They had money in 24. It's $50,000, and certainly that's no small sum. But as we've seen, the city pays out much more money than that. It seems not suspicious. Interesting to me that it will take 3 years to get $50,000 paid that's been outstanding and due all the time.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I suspect the contractor or the vendor was paid a long time ago, particularly in view of the fact that if you want to sue the city for a breach of contract, the statute of limitations, the period within which you can bring suit is only 12 months. So that if these vendors hadn't been paid for work that was done in 2022, they would have lost the legal right today even to go to court and demand payment. So I think these are accounting entries and not necessarily reflective of a current payment of money. These are monies that were already paid, that were paid at a time when there was no contract in place to cover the services, and now we're just sort of going back and cleaning the books up, so to speak.
Okay. And to the point you made, we both lawyers here. I had a client call yesterday, and the city tore down one of his buildings, and he wanted to go after the city. They did it. It was a neighboring building that was faulty. They tore it down and tore his down as well. He found out he wanted to go after the city, either to get another building, replace the one he had, or get reimbursed financially. And when I found out, I was like, well, when did it happen? About 4 years ago. So for all of the clients out there who are businesses, when things happen, you must operate and act in a fast fashion. Whether that means hiring counsel, getting the consult, but don't wait till the last minute. He had no legal remedy. He waited years after it happened to make something happen. His statute of limitation has expired. I doubt he fulfilled the local tort claim act, and certainly the state tort claim act wasn't an issue, but he didn't do what he needed to do in a time frame, which basically he may have lost the building and the value of it because he was sitting on his hands waiting for the city to come back to him and be benevolent. I think he assumed they were going to fix it for him and make it right without getting counsel, and it didn't happen. And now the time frame is well beyond the statute of limitations.
Yeah, when you believe you've been harmed, whether by action of the city, but negligent action on the part of a private party, it is always best to seek as quickly as possible competent legal advice. And that's never more true than if you believe that your rights have been violated by a government entity. Because in that instance, even more than others, your rights to recover can be severely restricted. typically, you may have heard this concept called sovereign immunity. What that means is that the government you can only sue the government when the government says you can sue it. And so the timing of lawsuits, the timing of claims, the method in which you have to submit a claim, all of which are provided for and prescribed under law, and generally must be followed meticulously if you are to preserve your rights. So it's always a good idea to seek competent legal counsel when you believe your rights have been violated to any extent.
Bob, to that point, some of the issues we have here, and we're talking about unauthorized procurement. Basically, your position is they got paid, but it didn't show in the books. I'm not sure they got paid. You're much kinder to the city than I am. I've had many clients who were not paid for work that was rendered. And what happens is, for all our small business clients, get counsel. If you're in a situation where there's a large outstanding bill and you can't get payment, you have to get counsel. Not because you're going to bring suit, but you can have someone to negotiate on your behalf to get things done. We've had a client recently who had an issue with government and they weren't paid on time. It's often their clients aren't paid on time. Well, having a lawyer make phone calls actually greases the wheels to get things done. Most of the clients focus on their business and their vocation. So if you're a plumber, you focus on plumbing. Electrician, you focus on electrician work. You don't focus on accounts receivable. But for my business clients, it's very important. You have to. The way your business isn't the plumbing work, electrical work, it's about bringing revenue in for the company to pay your employees. And that only happens when all the other things are done as well. So the unauthorized procurement is a good example of that makes sure your eyes on the ball, because not getting paid by a government agency isn't uncommon. In fact, it's quite common.
Not only not getting paid, but one of the most common complaints that I've heard over the last 50 years or so is late payment.
Yes,
it's just not getting paid on time, particularly unfortunately, as it relates to Baltimore City and with respect to Baltimore City public school system. Not getting paid on time is a major problem, and there's been a lot of legislation and regulations and attention given to that issue, but it never really seems to get better. So what happens is, at least among several firms that I know, several firms, is that you anticipate not getting paid on time, and the cost of that delay in dollars and cents you add to your bid price. And so somehow buried in your bid price as a part of your general overhead or wherever you decide to put it, there is the contingency item which becomes permanent, of not getting paid on time. The problem with that is that once you bump up your basis for bidding purposes to include that a dollar amount or percentage, whatever it may be, for not getting paid on time, it never comes down. It's almost like expecting once your insurance premiums go up to getting notice later on that, hey, we're going to reduce your premiums. I have never gotten such a notice. And the taxpayers of Baltimore City will never get such a benefit. Once contractors get the idea firmly that you're not going to get paid on time, and once you make the adjustment for that in your bid price, that adjustment remains part of your permanent overhead factor, which you include in all bids going forward, which means that there's a hidden cost that to Baltimore City and the residents of other jurisdictions that don't pay on time. That's a hidden cost that the residents, the taxpayers pay, that they simply will never know about, and in most cases will never be reduced. And so that's in addition to the obviously not getting paid on time and the impact that has on the business itself, which in many cases, particularly as it relates to small business, they don't have the cash to float the city or the state or the federal government for that period of time. In other words, your bills, as Hassan says, your workers have to be paid on whatever period of time, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is. That you're not going to go to your employees and say, I got to give you a rain check on getting paid because the city didn't pay us on time or the state didn't pay us on time. No, that's not going to. In fact, it's illegal not pay them on time, and you could be facing up to treble damages for not doing it. So you have to have enough money in the bank to cover those kinds of expenses at least. And that's particularly difficult for small businesses that typically do not have access to those kinds of resources. So not getting paid on time is a big deal for everybody, and it's a bigger deal for the companies that don't have the resources to finance government work. Now, also, I would say there's some good news in the agenda from next Wednesday that I saw. For those who know about it, the Sankofa Children's Museum of African Culture has been an institution in Baltimore for many, many years. I congratulate them on a grant from the city to help facilitate their operations, a grant of $100,000. Congratulations to Sankofa for that. Also, for those who may have buildings that have been damaged by the overflow from the city's sewer system, you might know that the city can be held liable for those damages. And if the claim is properly made from a timing and you have proof, ultimately the city will reimburse you, at least if you're able to negotiate a settlement. That happened with respect to a property at 1543 North Gate Road in Baltimore City. The city settled their claim for sewage back up into the basement. The city settled their claim for $204,000. So be sure, again, to seek legal advice when you believe that you've been damaged and pursue it, and you can get recovery if you're able to prove your claim. Let's see if there's anything else of note here in the agenda for next week.
Let me ask you this, Bob. From your experience, what have you seen the biggest area where we've seen more disbursement from the city in terms of actual contracts and pay? Is it just city services such as repair, such as what do they call it? Not landscaping. When they come in out there and they repair the sidewalk and then they repair the streets.
Oh, is the street paving?
Is that the biggest area that we see in procurement, or what's the biggest area of procurement that you've seen for the city?
Well, the biggest spender, I mean, the biggest item from a spending point of view, a procurement point of view, is the Department of Public Works.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones who manage the wastewater treatment plants, Back River, and so forth. They're the ones who have maintained the most of the infrastructure that the city owns, whether it's underground utilities or above ground. They spend the most money. They have the biggest part of the budget, I suspect. After the Department of Public Works, probably comes the Department of Transportation. They manage the roadways. They were responsible for. They're the ones who you see that are doing the repaving of streets and that sort of thing. And as you know, if you drive a vehicle in Baltimore City, the streets are in regular need of repair. So Department of Transportation probably is next. Then you have the Department of General Services, which generally handles maintenance items, maintenance of the buildings and repair items of the buildings. But the entire city budget and where they spend the most money, again, due to the efforts of the city comptroller's office, is available online in what they call the city dashboard. If you go online and follow the menu prompts, you can find on the comptroller's website in the dashboard a breakdown of what monies the city spends in what procurement area, at least the money that it spends in the form of contract awards, which is the bulk of what it spends, other than what it spends for its own payroll expense for city employees. All right, let's see, anything else of note? Again, the board of estimates meets on next Wednesday, and I encourage you to tune in or to call in and to observe for yourself what goes on. There's another item on the agenda. It's a sole source item. It's Public Works.
Well, one second, for the viewers, what does sole source mean?
Sole source means it was awarded or is to be awarded without any competitive bidding. It's a negotiated price with only a single vendor, or it could be even a bid price. Although if when the city puts an item out for bid, if they only get one bid, typically they will resolicit. That is, they'll put it out again to try to get more competition. But sometimes it doesn't do that. Sometimes it will go forward with only one bid, and sometimes it would be decided in advance that there's no advantage to putting it out for competition, because they know in advance that there's only one source for the item or for the service, and so they award on what's called a sole source basis, meaning there's no competition for that particular, to provide those goods or that particular service. And the good thing from a vendor's point of view of sole source is that there is no competition. That you don't have to worry about somebody submitting a price lower than yours, because there is no other bidder out there. And that doesn't mean that the city will open its pocketbook and you can get whatever you want, but it's a tremendous advantage not to have to be able to negotiate a price with only the city, and not have to look over your shoulder for somebody else who's standing in the wings ready to come in and underbid you or lowball the work to a point where it becomes not profitable. So sole source contracting can be lucrative, and it is definitely preferred over situations where you have to compete with other companies.
I'll say that so my clients, they would love to have sole source contracts. The idea that you can walk in and say, here's my price, and the government say, okay, here's a contract, is a great idea. It's incredibly hard to find sole source contract for small vendors. I normally see sole source for the bigger companies, not for small minority businesses, unless someone happens to be at the right place and right time, which in my mind never happens.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, again, reserved for situations where there's no option, where there's no alternative, where even if you put it out for competitive bid, you'd only get one bidder anyway, because of the nature of the item is there's only one company that has what you need. And so you say, why waste time in putting it out when we know in advance what the outcome is going to be? But it's sole source is supposed to be a last resort, because the idea is from competitive bidding, which is required for most public contracts, is that for the benefit of the taxpayers, you're supposed to get the lowest price available from a responsible bidder. A responsible bidder is someone who can be trusted to deliver on time and as specified whatever goods and services are. And the theory is that low bidder will deliver the goods or services on time and at the price, and it'll be the best price you can get because there was competition to get the contract in the first instance. That's the theory. Now, you might say, in reality, is that premise that really stands in the way of small and minority businesses getting a greater share of the work, because typically the low bidder is the company that has accumulated over time the greatest resources. Well, if you've accumulated the resources because other companies were wrongfully denied access to the opportunity, then awarding contracts to the low bidder, in fact, rewards them for the fact that they were the chosen ones over the years at times when other companies were wrongfully denied. So the low bid system in and of itself stands in the way, if you will. It's a structural impediment to the increase in opportunities on the part of small and minority businesses, which is why both at the local and state level, you have this thing called a small business reserve. What that means is that in the federal level, it used to be called 8A, although I'm not sure. I mean, the Small Business Administration I'm not sure which of the Trump orders or executive orders dismantled it, but SBA has been substantially, or its operations have been substantially impeded by one or more of Trump's executive orders. But at the state and local level, they still have small business reserve contracts. That means those are contracting opportunities that only small businesses or minority businesses are permitted to bid on. At the federal level, again, that used to be called 8A. But at local level, it's called Small Business Reserve. And that is the countermeasure, if you will, to the typical low bid requirement that's generally applicable to public works.
So I'll say we'll do another show. We go straight to 8A because I know a lot of contractors out there are interested in what's going on. Even before Trump came into office, there were pushbacks on 8A. There were certain cases where the court found it wasn't clear that AA was a valid program just based on how they provided funds and how they gave contracts. So I don't know what order he issued that made dismantle and or further break down 8A, but I think we should do a separate show. I'm sure we will, about 8A and what that means going forward. The reality is for our viewers, as the president's administration goes forward and have orders based on his policy and what he wants, it's going to change how we do business. It's going to change how our clients go after contracts. It's going to change whether they can get them or not. The point you made, I think, is counterintuitive, that if you have a low bid process, small and minority companies are excluded because they're not normally a low bidder. When you have more resources and more wealth, you can bid lower. I think people assume if you're smaller, you can cut back and you can bid lower. Well, you can, but you're working for free, basically. You're cutting back your overhead so thin, and which most of our clients do. They cut back the overhead so thin to get a contract that if anything goes wrong in the margins, they're underwater. But you're right. Bigger companies have more economy of scale, you would say, so they can go in and bid lower. But what I see happen more often than not, they bid lower knowing they get the change orders. They bid lower knowing they can pull and make up for some of the low bid on the back end. But we want to talk more about how the current administration's policies of eliminating federal workforce, of eliminating the idea of diversity in some of their contractors and some of their partners, and how that's going to affect small businesses. The reality is a lot of small businesses, my clients anyway, are minority businesses, women-owned businesses, right, or African-American-owned businesses. So if there's a push to disallow even the consideration for having a black-owned business, it gives the effect of pushing black-owned businesses back. So even though there's no indication that having a black-owned business means that you're doing less service or you're doing a different work, or you're not doing quality work, if the administration is saying we don't even want to consider companies that have consideration for black-owned businesses, it's a red flag, or it's not a red flag. It's a signal to the business world, hey, get rid of the black-owned businesses in your atmosphere because we don't want to see them, hear from them, or know about them. You're supporting the idea of fewer minority businesses, and that will be, if it happens, where I think it's going to happen, it's going to be tremendous. In the economy, it's tremendous in the community. This part of the country, whether it's D.C., whether it's Maryland, whether it's Virginia, are full of government contractors and full of government entities. And they're across the board saying we won't take into consideration small minority businesses. We want you to ignore that. It may be rough for a lot of people in the near future.
Well, it's not. Trump has declared war on any program that recognizes race as a relevant factor, whether it's called DEI or whatever it may be. He's eliminated, at least attempted to eliminate race is to make particularly African Americans invisible. We're not supposed to take that into account anymore for any particular reason. And his position is buoyed by two things, promoted by two things. Number one, not just the people like Stephen Miller, who's an avowed racist, who's his deputy chief of staff, or Steve Bannon, or those people, but DOGE or Doge or whatever it's called, the Department of Government Efficiency, is run by a South Africaner. Elon Musk, who was raised under a system of apartheid in South Africa, and for all appearances is running the federal government now. And which explains why the only refugees that are currently being admitted, really without question, are South Afrikaners from Musk's homeland. Some people might think it an irony that a South Africaner can come to the United States, stay illegally for 2 years as an illegal immigrant, and then using in part the benefit of taxpayer money, taxpayers of all of whom includes black people, and become the richest man in the world and end up running the federal government. Well, that is a bit of irony. At the same time, however, we have to recognize that the programs that have been developed over the years to create preference or to remedy, if you will, the past practices of discrimination against black people have all been designated as so-called, for the most part, social programs. And as Chief Justice Roberts indicated in the Harvard case a few years ago, you know, to have a program which is infinite. In other words, we don't know, these social programs don't have a defined time when the objective will be accomplished. They don't even specify what the objective is. For example, I said to someone just this morning earlier, they said, well, what is diversity? Well, it means that there's enough black people there so that they don't feel alone, but not too many to make white people feel afraid.
I'm not sure if that's a good definition for diversity, but I get your point. And you know, the speaker, I talked earlier about the loss of her son, but the Speaker of the House, Adrian Jones, I understand, has introduced a bill to create a Maryland Department of, quote, social equity. Well, I don't know what social equity is. I know that the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Rights of Maryland provides for just compensation when the government is responsible for taking life, liberty, or property of an individual. We saw that theory espoused in the case of Henrietta Lacks. If you know the story of Henrietta Lacks, it was her cells that had been used because it was the first time that human cells had been cloned outside in a test tube. And because of that capability, all kinds of advances in medicine have been made, everything from polio, even to COVID, to cancer treatment. Of course, she died in 1951 from cervical cancer, for cancer treatment and other things. And it's still being used today. And up until the government and Johns Hopkins was sued, her family, neither her or her family, had ever received a dime from the billions and billions and billions of dollars that had been profited from the use of her cells, which were harvested without her consent and without her knowledge. Well, part one, that claim was in part based upon the just compensation clause under the Fifth Amendment and under the 14th Amendment as it applies to states and localities. So and what that means is, you know, the physical labor, the intellectual property, and the other property of black people in this country was due to be compensated for, but it never has been. If you recall, we never even got the 40 acres and the mule. Well, rather than face up to that issue and establish a firm legal foundation for reparations, and you might call it what it is, we've elected to go the softer route of referring to it as the remedy as social programs. Well, the problem with social programs is that they're discretionary. They're not based upon solid legal foundation at all, which means that when you get a guy like Elon Musk running the government, he can get his buddy, Trump to issue a whole bunch of executive orders, which effectively eliminate any social program that was designed to remedy racial discrimination. And so it's odd, even at the time that's happening at the federal level, we see the Speaker of the House producing a bill not to establish a foundation under the Maryland Declaration of Rights for just compensation, but continue in the mode of a social program, which from a legal point of view has been undermined considerably by the Supreme Court already. For me, the issue is, and I get why we have social programs. There's the idea of trying to move culture forward, right? Move the idea forward that black businesses in particular are just as valid as anyone else. The work can be done by black folks. It's a weird situation in this country. Certainly, history has been black folks have been workers, whether slaves or sharecroppers or up the line. But having your own business is a different story. and people wanting to support black business is a different story. It's a chilling effect. When you go through the government and say any company that has even a consideration for hiring someone who's diverse, we don't want social media mentioning diversity in their social media. We don't want companies mentioning it in their contracts. We don't want any consideration for it as if we are in a colorblind world. It's chilling. It gives the impression that, hey, these are people are persona non grata. We don't want you doing business with them or working with them. You don't got to say it explicitly, but it is what it is. Everyone knows it. Everyone can see it. You can feel it. Even to the point where we say DEI, people are saying we mean black folks. Quite often it's not black folks, it's
Right.
people other than black folks. But because we're so tied to the idea that we've been, in the country recognized, we've had so little so long, we assume the programs are only for us. They're not. But any program that's meant to fix past wrongs is assumed to be for us. And any attempt to ameliorate it or get rid of it is a shot across the bow for the black community in a real way.
And it also reflects the continuing notion of white supremacy, that the reason that somehow or another, if a black person or a non-white person was hired during the time of a social program, that they lacked the qualifications of even the average white person who presumably didn't get the job, is arguably because they were white. Now, we didn't talk, the problem, people take a snapshot of, and they say of what they see, but reality, life is a motion picture. So that those who take a snapshot and say this is reverse discrimination because a white person didn't get a job, that they forget, they ignore the 400 years when the opportunity was by government sponsored, the opportunity for that was completely denied to other people, and worse than that, that the property of other people was wrongfully just taken away. There've been plenty of examples where black people, without the benefit of the government, except for protection of the federal troops, were able to thrive without any kind of government assistance. Black Wall Street, not just in Rosewood, but all around the country. Black communities, and even in Central Park in New York was a black community that were thrived relying upon one another and relying upon ourselves, and were successful. They were black millionaires. But Rosewood was bombed. Not because of government, not because they had taken jobs from white folks or white people, or not because the government was providing too much assistance, but simply because of the resentment and retaliation against black people who were able to succeed and profit on their own without the benefit of being assisted by non-black people, by white people. And so most of the people who advocate, including myself personally, that for reparation, say that it's the government that owes a debt to black people, not white people, but the government itself, because the government, under the management of white folks, was guilty of the misappropriation, the theft of the resources, intellectual property, physical property, and other property of black folks for many, many years, and that there has never been just compensation as declared under the federal Constitution, or in Maryland, the Maryland Declaration of Rights.
So I'll say this, coming around, because we are board watching, our goal is to help people understand how they can move through. I think now is move through the business. I think now is a great time, as we're seeing the government be much more adversarial on itself. Like the government is forcing out employees and is changing policies in a very aggressive way. It's incumbent upon us to be able to find ways to have small businesses to work, actually pit their employees to work and get things done. I'm of the impression, and it's always been my view, and I'm an attorney, so maybe that's shaped my view. Having your financial house in order is the biggest issue in most minority communities. When you have enough financial means, it gives you enough leeway and cushion to support your people. And I don't care what minority community you are, whether you're African American, whether you are Hispanic, whether you're Southeast Asian, having financial means defrays some of the animosity and aversion towards your community, because you can keep each other in a way where you're stable and you're safe and you can build communities out. In the Black community, which is the community I'm a part of, there's far too little revenue coming in. So the result, when things happen, it hits the community especially hard. If once we start seeing federal governments get laid off and get fired, we're going to see a huge drop in the Black community, in the Black middle class. We're going to see a huge drop. A good number of Blacks are in government service, not because they run toward it, because private employers didn't always hire them in the first place.
Right.
Not because they weren't able, because they wouldn't hire them because their name may be Hassan Barnes or Robert the Shield, without a question as to whether they qualified. And that's a problem. So the goal of this show is to have debate and conversation about policies and procedures, not only at the local level like Baltimore City, but the state level of Maryland and federal level, and how we can do things and give information to help viewers navigate the waters of procurement and business, so they can also go and continue to thrive. Although the government has been adverse to DEI minorities openly, and the culture is changing in a way where it's openly adverse to it, there's still, in the Black community, there's never been a time that it's been easy. It's been no milk and honey. It's been a constant battle of more and more and more and pushing more. I think it's time to, and I'm not one of the leaders to do it, but I guess I'm not sure who our leaders are. We need to revamp that, but we have to figure out a different strategy as to how we're going to move along and make sure African Americans, in particular, Blacks in general, able to move forward and take care of their houses, so to speak. Whether it's another Black Wall Street, which I think the reason they all were destroyed, because that was the key. Being able to, not government assistance or government service, because they assume we're on the dole of the government, even though we pay taxes. Having your own communities where you have your own doctors and lawyers and accountants and dentists and bookkeepers. You have all the things you need local within yourself. The dollar goes around the community 2, 3, 4, 5 times. That's how you're able to build a situation where you can have good schools and without having to pay a bunch of money for private school, where you can have good professionals to give services to your people without having to leave your community to go somewhere else to get them. The biggest things we've seen in this country has been when economics have been in play. The Montgomery boycott, when I was a kid, it always struck me as being interesting that they boycotted the bus system and they went to court for it. Like the bus company went to court for a boycott, basically saying, hey, what are you guys doing not paying us your money? Hold up. This can't sustain. You can't not pay us your money because we spend so much of our dollar. Every company budgets our spending in their bottom line. When we don't spend, it's a huge issue for them. Other communities don't spend as much as we do. So they don't even include them. They can't make their bottom line without our spending, which means we can do it for ourselves. We can spend it with ourselves.
Well, and so that people understand why we spend so much time talking about what happens and the theory under relating to the federal government. You know, Baltimore City receives a significant amount of, or has received historically anyway, a significant amount of financial assistance from the federal government for as it relates to environmental matters, whether it's upgrading the system at Back River or Patuxent or otherwise. The state receives a substantial amount of money for highway construction, the federal highway system. That all of those translate into jobs that are lost to the Black community, not just the government workers or the federal workers, but all the other jobs at the local level that depended upon that resulted from the receipt of the federal dollars. I mean, just a couple of years ago, the city received over $600 million in what I call COVID relief money, 671 million, I think it was. That money is what accounted for the city even having a budgetary surplus going forward. That money funded a lot of jobs in Baltimore City. Which brings to mind the fact that we have to realize what the real purpose of the Minority Business Program was. And I keep saying to people, it's about jobs. And it's not about just any job. It's about jobs that will provide a living wage, if you will, to your family. Baltimore City has a living wage law. If you get a Baltimore City contract, you are required to pay your workers a certain amount of money. Now, it's not enough, quite frankly, and oftentimes we go forward with the idea that something is better than nothing. Well, something is not always better than nothing, but nevertheless, Baltimore City does have a living wage law, which provides a higher hourly rate than the federal minimum wage, which I think is still around $7.25. But the idea is that most people, in order to obtain financial security, are going to get it as employees. They're not going to get it as business owners. They're going to get it as employees. And so the purpose of the Minority Business Program was to create more minority businesses so that those minority businesses would have the opportunity to employ more minority people. That's the connection. And to the extent that Baltimore City loses federal dollars and cannot continue to promote those types of objectives, then we're jeopardized. We're jeopardized. It's sooner or later, there's going to be lawsuits challenging the city's MBE program. It's challenging the state's MBE program. Now, lawyers are typically conservative people, and so government lawyers will say, let's redo the program so that to avoid the lawsuit. Well, if you redo the program to avoid the lawsuit, then it means you're going to do away with the benefit that the program was designed to achieve. So you're going to end up where you began with nothing. So you're better off, in my opinion, to establish a firm legal foundation for the program in the first place. And again, that has been studiously and laboriously avoided over the years because it brings us head to head in conflict with the idea of white supremacy. And that's an issue that as a community is black, we've never challenged in a legal way. We've never really challenged it, but the day is coming. In fact, it's here when we can't kick that can down the road any farther. We're going to have to face up. We're going to have to face it because there's a group of people in charge today who are designed to who say not just that we've given enough to black people, but we're not even going to recognize your existence anymore for any purposes, for any beneficial purposes or positive. And so whether you believe me or not, all you got to do, and even if you don't, just keep on living, keep on watching, and keep on tuning in, and you'll see that what you never believed would come true will in fact come true.
I'll say this: if any people watching the show want to give questions in as to ideas you may have for small businesses or for business in general, certainly you guys are able to go in and ask questions. I'm always interested and curious as to see what other people are thinking about things. Lawyers have different views on things. They think about things in a much more expansive way because how they were trained. You were trained to think a certain kind of way, so your brain focuses very intently. Most people aren't lawyers. They don't think the same way we think. They think about brass tacks. They want to know money in, money out. How do I get more money in so that I can take care of my family? And that's the harder conversation. I think that's going to take 2 and 3 and 4 additional steps to get to that point. And then the more we talk about it, the more we see, I think we'll get into a place where we'll get some ideas as to what needs to happen going forward to make sure people are able to access funds. The reality is the federal government is a huge employer. And financially, I saw a debate on, I'm not sure what shows, on maybe CNN or MSNBC, and there was conservative and liberal. And the conservative, they was talking about the certain cities and towns not receiving funds or money because federal government employees were a big portion of the workforce. And they were like, well, why do we need the government to support the town? It shouldn't matter whether federal government employees are there or not. The reality is, things happen when money goes, right? So if you have the reason this part of the country, whether it's Delaware, whether it's New York or New Jersey or Virginia or DC, is a huge amount of federal government employees in those places, which means they get a salary and they can afford to pay for a mortgage and they can afford to pay for all the things and they can support the local business and infrastructure. The federal government, people see it as a utility just for the administration of laws. No, the purpose of it is not only to administer laws, but to provide the society, the community. And it does that all kinds of ways. It does it by putting money out there, but by hiring people. The mere fact that you're hiring someone is community development. Giving people jobs is community development. And the federal government does it probably better or more than anyone else in the country because of the size. So as we see things get pulled away, we have to find out other ways to develop our communities in a way that's more expansive and open, and we can figure out. The minority businesses have been like whack-a-mole. ago. For years, they've been trying to get themselves in programs like the MBE program, so they can bring revenue in. And to some extent, it's worked some, but to a large extent, we haven't seen those businesses go from being small businesses to be large businesses. To your point, it's about a job program more than building wealth. We have to be able to find a mechanism to switch it from small businesses working to make money to pay their employees to working to build businesses. We've seen in real time. You mentioned Elon Musk and his ability to come here from another country and build wealth. One, he wasn't a poor person. His background isn't like the background of most Americans.
Right.
But two, the idea that he's built huge companies. The reason he's the richest person in the world is because he's out there. He can build a great car, or he can build anything. He's able to build and expand in a way that's profitable. And for most of the small businesses, the profitability is the question. There's enough money to pay people, but that's not profitability at all. Tesla was initially profitable. SpaceX is going to be very, very profitable. The Boeing company he has is going to be very profitable. Twitter, which he got and lost revenue, is going to be profitable. All the things he's done is going to be profitable. And I don't mean $1 over overhead. It's millions and millions and millions over the expenses.
There wouldn't be an Elon Musk as we know him if it wasn't for the federal government. His companies today have over 16 contracts. He's been paid over $23 billion by the federal government under his contracts. And so the idea that the government, the purpose of government is to protect the people from the king. The purpose of government is to protect the people from the king. And you have a problem when the king takes over the government. In other words, the rich folk, the king never didn't need the government. The king owned everything. The king, and so the people got things only to the extent that the king was willing to give them things. Where the government got there was created to make sure that the king gave people enough so that they could at least survive and thrive without it. There's no question that the economy of this country and the world cannot be successful in the lives of most people without government employment. It simply cannot.
To that point, and for the people out there online, most of our businesses that are huge, like Microsoft or Tesla or Apple
or Northrop Grumman,
they are huge because government contracts. They don't advertise as Microsoft is a government contractor. Right. They make a lot of money from the government, from the taxpayers' money. One of the largest or wealthiest black men in the country, Worldwide Technologies is a company. He does government contracting. When we're able to access those kind of funds and grow, we grow well. The reality is minority businesses typically don't have access to it.
And the reason why people always say, well, the dollar in the black community only circulates one time or half a time, well, that's because there's no place in the black community to spend it. There's no black businesses to buy goods and services from. So 90% of every dollar that the black community has is already pledged to go back to another community, even before you receive it. So when you see people like somebody texted me this morning, Al Sharpton says, don't buy this and don't buy from Target and don't buy from McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and all those. That's fine, but the message ought to be who to buy from, not the message ought to be to spend your money in a black business. I don't care. Now I'm not selling. I'm not going to drive from Randallstown to Salisbury, Maryland, to buy a carton of eggs. I'm not going to do that. But if I'm serious about promoting black business and I have to drive an extra 5 or 10 miles, or I have to spend an extra 5 cents or 10 cents, then I've got to make that sacrifice. We've got to be willing to make the sacrifice to promote our own. And the fact that we want to promote our own cannot be seen as it is as making somehow or another that makes us racist or anti-Semitic or any of those things. That, God blesses the child who has their own. I didn't make that up. I read that somewhere. So anyway, with all due respect to Al Sharpton about where not to buy, what we ought to be advising black folk is where to buy. And if that means going the extra mile, making a sacrifice, then who better to make the sacrifice for than been deprived and denied over the years. Then that doesn't mean so. Oh, I I guess our time is up. We hear the music in the background. When Hassan and I get going on these topics, we sort of can't stop. One of these days, we're going to do this program so that you can call in, write in, send us comments, and we can hear your feedback directly on what we do in the meantime. Until next time, this is the Board Watch. See you.
Take care, guys.